Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast, the space where we breathe deeply, live more intentionally, and find meaning in the messy middle of life. I'm your host, Kendra Chapman, mom of triplets, busy professional, caffeine lover, and a big believer in slowing down so we can show up fully. If you're a busy human navigating career, family, life changes, or all of the above, you're in good company. Around here, we don't chase perfection. We build rhythms that support peace, clarity, and joy. And today, we're diving into a profound topic that sits at the very heart of our Go Slow to Go Fast philosophy: spiritual wellness and the profound connection between our inner world and our physical well-being. My guest today is Erin Cutrone. She's an expert in spiritual wellness, the biology of trauma, and the vibrational healing that we can experience through her guidance today. She'll guide us through understanding why our symptoms aren't bad, how accessing heart can lead us to healing, and why our triggers are actually our greatest guides. We'll explore the fascinating intersection where spirituality and psychology meet, delve into the nervous system, mental health, and even touch on quantum physics and some flower essences. So whether you're listening on your morning commute or folding laundry or on a walk and you've got this podcast in your ears, this moment is just for you. So take a deep breath, let the world slow down for a minute, and let's get started. So welcome, Erin. I'm so glad that you could join us today. I wanted to definitely jump in a little bit on your work in biology of trauma and the psychology of stress and how that's incredibly vital to our process for Go Slow to Go Fast here today. But I just want to say welcome, and I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit more from you about what Go Slow to Go Fast means to you.
Oh, yes. Hi, listeners. I love this because it really is such a pivotal component to the work that I do, but I think that is also just so needed in the world. I'm a therapist and I've moved more into the coaching realm just to create a bigger impact and to, not jump through all of the, I sometimes call it limitations that the therapist world can do, per this state, per this, coaching, we kind of can branch out a lot more. But the going slow, what I have found, I've been a therapist for almost 20 years, and it started a lot of my work in mindfulness based, which is a huge buzzword now, but 20 years ago was not. And that slowing down, that is so hard for our bodies to do naturally, even though it's natural way. Like we've just strayed from these natural ways. And I know you know all about this because you speak a lot to the rhythms and, building those rhythms or reestablishing those rhythms of nature, of self. So I think that when I'm speaking to the nervous system, so over time, I've really dialed in the work to be a lot about that physiology and the biology, but really speaking to the nervous system, that our nervous systems are so comfortable in that dysregulated state. It's like our baseline, which I think is why it's so hard for so many of us to slow down. It's like not this concept. I mean, I used to laugh. I'd have like signs all over my room that's like, breathe, just breathe, and stickers. And it's just like, and I'm still not doing it. It's in our biology, these systems that we're trying to rewire.
Yeah, and it's so true because I have to remind myself with this podcast to do the very thing I'm talking about every time I get on here, to go slow to go fast and to breathe. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it all becomes this like very counterintuitive practice, but really the more I do this, and I'm sure we're going to get into all of this throughout our conversation, but it's all about less. It's less thinking, it's less movement. It's how do we teach that body, or I like to say like convince the body that it is okay to go slow and to be still And so
Mhm.
that's a lot of the work that I do in kind of unpacking some of this is like less. Even now for myself, I don't need to know as much. I don't want to know as much. I'm taking in less information.
Mhm.
And when we do that, it's amazing what other systems start to turn back online where, we get a lot of this work is moving into those spiritual realms. And we're talking about intuition and, the brain and intuition are two different parts here.
Mhm.
The survival system and intuition are two different systems. But when we start to do less and be more present and still, all that stuff starts to come back online naturally.
Mhm. Yeah. Have you come to any, thinking around when humanity started doing more and more and more? Has it been a recent thing or has it been a long time thing that is just kind of hitting a wall now?
That's a good question. I think, yes, it has always been, but I look a lot to, how our movements are, let's say with 5G, right? Everything is
Mhm.
now faster. And
Mhm.
and and so the information that we take in and I do this a lot, historically, we were never meant to take in this much information. Like we weren't
Mm.
meant to know what was going on all across the globe and beyond, so I think it does kind of take away from our natural ways of a lot of this. I mean, and for me as a therapist through these last, few years, I'm just waiting for the break. It was just like one thing
Mhm.
after the next of these major, major things. And how I would help people or guide them to say, like, okay, this is what is you're watching on the news and on your feeds and it's coming in, but what's happening in your immediate community? Like start small. What's happening in your home? Start small. But when they would look to their community versus this information that was coming in, what was happening in their community was not what was happening on the grand scale, right? So if we're all being given this information and there's a balance point, and that's a lot of what I teach is finding that sweet spot that is the end. It's taking in information and knowing when it's enough. It's
Mhm.
finding that limit and expansion. And it becomes this, very nuanced, but this is the subtle pieces that I work with that over time we get better at tuning into um, a more subtle information. But yeah, 5G definitely amplifies this, I think.
It's just information overload these days in so many ways. And I think the stress on the body, I know you speak to this often with your clients. It's like you wonder how much we are understanding at some levels that we understand what stress is, but
Mhm.
do we really understand what it's doing to our body?
Right. Right. And I love that that's a piece of what we're, wanting to dive into today. And
Mhm.
a lot of my work you would call unconventional for therapy. I used to call myself like not your average therapist, and people were like, this is not like any other therapy I've had. And I would always take that as a compliment of, yes,
Mhm.
because I use what I call bottom up strategies, which is tapping into the body. And, the mind is going to match what the body is doing.
Mm.
So when we can tap into, just let's go to the physical body of simply tension and ease, and then we can dive more into the nervous system. But, if I'm in tension, my brain, it's like this loop. So it's signaling to my brain, I think of run, fight. Our body's ready to run. It's ready to move. It's ready to go, or it's ready to
Mhm.
shut down
Mhm.
serve. But then the mind is just going to give it more information of that. So when we work with, the softening practices, now I can access, like it doesn't change necessarily the specifics of my thoughts, but it does change the pace and the frequency. And this is where, that vibrational stuff starts to come in, where it's just a different understanding of the body mind mechanism. So, yeah, those body approaches to access what's going on in the mind and the movements becomes such a better way. I think it's more tangible. The thoughts move so fast, they're so fleeting. You could ask any of the listeners, I know I do this. It's like I start with, this one thought of like what I want to complete in the day. And before I know it, I'm on like, this loop that how did I get here? I was just talking about, the plan. And that's what our mind is so active and so fast. How do you catch that? Where did it go, in that direction? We have no idea. So slowing it down helps us kind of tap into the specific thoughts a little bit differently.
I think it makes sense that if we slow down and we are aware of the stressors that are going on in our life, so we make a point of taking time to slow down and
Mhm.
to do less.
Mhm.
And I think this is where, I weave in that the biology and the physiology. I speak a lot of stress and trauma, but this is pivotal in all of this work. And I do it really simplified, so it's not so complex,
Mhm.
but understanding the nervous system and, let's just really, really simplify it to a safety system and a danger system. And
Mhm.
this is the work of Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory. And we use what's called the still face experiments to
Mm,
kind of really portray that depending on what system we're in, from a very neutral, we use facial expressions, from a very neutral face, we're actually taking in very different signals. So I speak a lot to understanding what nervous system you're working from. You have to know that to then see like, oh, from this very neutral, experience, situation, person, I might be taking in a very different information from the very same thing. So,
mhm,
when we're in that danger system or that threat system or that survival system, all systems go offline other
mhm,
than what we need to do to get to safety.
mhm,
Safety systems are offline, logic offline, rationale or rational thinking, memory all goes offline. The digestive system goes offline, the immune system, the reproductive
mm,
system all goes offline. And then something that I speak to quite frequently is in that as well, the compassion circuitry goes offline.
mm,
So we're only taking in danger cues from something that might be very neutral if I don't know what system I'm in. That's
mm.
the crux of a
That's
lot of my work. And once you understand that, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why are we not
it
taught this?
does. It does. And anybody who's working with people, either adults or little people, having an education background, that makes so much sense because
Mhm.
kids come to school
Exactly.
sometimes in those more, unfortunately, more often in those modes of they're just surviving
Mhm.
to and not thriving. And so when they're in that survival mode, they're not picking up on the same cues that you would expect them to, coming from a maybe a teacher perspective or a
Mhm.
parent perspective. They're hearing something completely different.
And in the world, like I look a lot to why this work is so profound right now is we have people that are going through the world and again, using that bottom up strategy, but in a different capacity. Think of what happens if we're in survival, our vision gets really small and fixated on the
Mm,
target. So what are we doing all day? We're looking at these tiny devices.
yes.
It's priming us. The information that's coming in, danger, be careful, look out, that's priming our systems to already be there. And then, right, we expect people to learn or to have compassion or to
Hmm.
understand. And it's like those systems are not offline. So the nervous
Right.
system work becomes profound in helping people get that system back online. These are the whys. This is why we can know all of the things, but we can't apply it because the nervous system is still in survival for a lot of us. And
Mm,
as it
yeah.
should in these times, but
Right.
is where discernment comes in. And so we turn that safety system back online and now we can access same information, but different comes in very,
Hmm. So knowing that so many people are probably living in that state right now where it's just become normal, it's the new norm to
Mhm.
be dysregulated.
Mhm. Mhm.
What would be some simple strategies that you provide to your clients to kind of get them out of that? Maybe not for very long, but
Mhm.
enough to where they can be aware of, oh, this is
Mhm.
different than what I'm
Mhm.
normally doing.
so from bottom up, I always call it bottom up because we work with the body to access the mind and we play with both. But I use the body a lot because it is tangible. So if I said to anybody, like, grab your thought and hold it.
Mhm.
We can't. We don't even know where it is. It's out of our body. So a lot of, our thoughts become memories, experience even past. It's out of body. So I have a very different lens that
Mm.
I use here, but simply like I use posture a lot because I can tell even right now, I say we're forward thinkers and we're thinking of the future. So we tend
Mhm.
to shift forward. My posture is leaning forward right now. I can feel that.
Mhm.
So posture could be, okay, can you bring your, spine? And this is my background in yoga as well. Can you bring your spine in any more alignment?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh yeah, are you leaning back? So the spine is going to give us a lot of information as to where we are. And the shoulders I use because those tend to be really tight for a lot of people. Or, I know for me, we're on computers, we drive, or they're up in my ears. As soon as I tune in and I relax my shoulders, every single time they can relax. So
Mhm.
again, that's signaling to the brain. If my shoulders are up, it's either I'm ready to run or fight or move. That's sending signals to my brain that it is not a time for relaxing. But we can teach that body like, oh, let's just try it now for the listeners, like tune into your posture. And can you relax the shoulders a little bit? And can you relax the stomach a little bit? And just notice by relaxing the stomach, which I think most of us will have to do you
Mhm.
take a bigger breath? Right. So a very simple thing that we are not tuned into is our body and our breath. But instead of access the breath, we can access certain points in the body. So even simpler than a body scan, I don't need to go through my whole body. I might pick 2 or 3 spots that are going to signal. And as soon as I do that, you might notice a bigger breath. Sometimes that bigger breath for us in my work is that system can start to come back online. If your stomach starts to gurgle, we've just put that digestive system back online. If you take a spontaneous breath, like I get that a lot with my clients. And I'm like, oh, did you see that? That's the parasympathetic system coming back online. That's your safety system.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. It's okay to be still here with this person in this
Mhm.
environment.
Yeah.
Those are my like go-tos right away.
Right. When somebody takes a big sigh,
Mhm.
you know, I'm working with people, those are one of the signs I can kind of tell that either they needed to take a break and get more oxygen or they just feel more comfortable with me
Mhm.
in whatever we're doing or talking about. But if they're
Right.
not breathing, then they're tense and they're holding it in and they may not even realize it. So that's a good
Mm.
reminder to think about
And
your
this
stomach. And
totally, and this can lead right into some of, like when you say someone feels comfortable with me or that they needed that bigger breath, because we move so fast and we're keeping up with these computer speeds, we're not
mhm,
meant to move that fast. And I talk to a lot of people in their jobs and the, workload is just growing and they're inundated with these piles that are meant to be for computer speeds.
mm,
We are not meant to move that way. Yet to keep our job, we're overriding
yeah,
those internal cues that are saying, okay, too much. Okay, we need to pause. Okay, take a breath. Okay, take some water. So when we start to listen to the impulses that are coming through, I'll say, are you thirsty? And it's like, oh,
mhm,
right. I am thirsty. I haven't had water in 3 hours. Or are you hungry? We override. Do you have to go to the bathroom?
yes,
We're on these meetings and it's like, oh, just 45 more minutes. I'll wait. No,
mhm,
like pause to go to the bathroom,
yeah,
listen to your body. We override it over and over. And we learn this, I'm sure as you see in the school ages, we learn this really early on.
yeah, we do. And I mean, I'm guilty of that, having been a teacher and school level leader later years where I expected kids to be in their seats and doing their work. And if they needed to take a bathroom break, we had to monitor when and how and all the things, right?
Right. And I know this is a lot of, I think, like Montessori schools, and I've worked in some
Yeah.
charter schools where we do give a little bit more freedom or a lot more freedom.
Mhm.
So we can
Mhm.
start to listen like, oh, my body is hungry. Or tune
Mhm.
into, well, is it hungry because I'm stressed and it's filling me? Is it hungry because it's time for me to have a little snack? I've been running around all morning. So I
Right.
think that that's what we're doing when I work with adults. We're trying to tap back into that inner listening and develop communication with this body that is trying to communicate with us. And then this
Mhm.
goes right into like symptoms and what I call like that new symptomology is, you know, what is that body trying to tell you instead of, oh, this is a bad thing or, oh, this is not good or, what does this mean? It's like, well, ask, tune in. What if it's not a bad thing? I'm
Right.
sure we'll dive into that too as part of our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. You've alluded to that, that our symptoms are not bad. And I think in at least in Western medicine, we have, doctors that are asking us like what our symptoms are if we go to the doctor and we're, telling them all the things that are wrong. But I don't know if I've heard any doctors or therapists say, "Well, your symptoms are not bad. Tell me
Mhm.
more." So, talk a little bit about how you dive into symptoms with your clients and what you uncover with them.
Mhm. So I guess I always start with, the concepts of what I call delabeling and depathologizing, which, in the medical world and in the therapy world is also, non-conventional or unconventional practices. But there's good reason for that because first of all, if I, pathologize it, which is, and again, we're finding that middle point that there is an importance to understand it and what it means and maybe how we can work around some of, supporting it. But what if it's not a bad thing? Pathology makes it sound like, oh, there's something wrong with me.
Mhm.
And, when I use terminology, it's not good or bad. And these things are not positive or negative, even. But I help people tune into, in my symptomology, do you feel like you are in more or less power here? And this is sort of
Mm.
taking from the work a little bit of the frequency of emotions. And we can dive into that a little deeper. But David Hawkins,
Mhm.
and not power by force. This is, you know, uh, do I feel more in alignment with self? And so that becomes a different kind of barometer than good or bad. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of our symptoms are what I call adaptations. My body learned how to do this thing to protect itself in this environment with this person, in this scenario, and it had to survive. So it did a thing. It turned something down. It turned something off. It shut off our access to it.
Mhm.
And and that's an important concept when we're doing any of this work is to invite that stuff in because if I judge it or, it's bad or negative, I'm going to start to use my energy to push it away. I'm going to stuff it. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to, now overwork to make sure nobody sees this thing that I do or have.
Right.
And that becomes energy consumption, metabolic energy consumption.
Mm.
So that's one way I start most of my work and the delabeling in a way, because I think it is our, natural way to, I'm going back to like all of the versions of me past and
Mhm.
developmentally, we are meant to evolve. And so if I label something, a lot of times I've found we identify as it, so I identify so much with it that I become it. And what we're trying to do in this work is to essentially unbecome. So if I identify as this, how do I become not this? So that's just like the preface to like access points to this. And then learning how to communicate with these symptoms. So, okay, I'm letting them in, I'm befriending them. I'm now trying to communicate with this adaptation, this part of my body that is trying to communicate with me. And for most of us, it's uncomfortable. So what do? We mute it, we silence it, we try to, you know, you know, minimize the pain, which of course,
Mhm.
if we are in insufferable pain, yes. But if we can withhold or withstand that just a little bit, we're missing important information. I need that information. When is it happening? Around who? What time of day?
Mm.
Is it around a certain person? Is it people of authority? Is it men or women? Is it before lunch? Is it after lunch? Is it a certain class that I'm in? Right. So if we mute that symptom before I get that information, great, you feel better and we want that, but it's still signaling to you that information. I'm just not receiving all that information.
Right. Right. Yeah,
So
I
just
think
like a very different way.
I've heard, that certain parts of the sides of the body could
Mhm.
represent the male or
Mhm.
the female,
Mhm.
and parts of your body could represent, I'm
Mhm.
sure chakra work is aligned in there somewhere,
Mhm. Mhm.
and just the idea of what exactly is, like you said, if it's a particular person or time of day that's triggering
Mhm.
something,
Mhm.
that's information that your body's telling you. You just have to know how to translate it.
Yes. And that's exactly when you're slowing down and tuning in. And, we're really trying to quiet the activity of the mind to go deeper, because the
Mm,
mind is going to come up with the story. And over time, that muscle in our brain, that neural pathway, that neural network is really strong in that direction. So it's very hard to convince the mind of other. But when we start to peel back some of these layers, like you had said, those physical symptoms, a lot of times for me are very, very much correlated. Here's that body mind connection that we know about and read about. But
mhm,
if I say to grab that thought or that emotion, we can't tangibly hold that. It's not something we can physically hold. We can feel it. Sure. I can sense it.
mhm,
Absolutely. But I can't hold it. And so what happens is over time, if I keep thinking that thought or experiencing replaying, this is the ruminating, in repetition, it does become dense. And now that's
mm,
going to take hold somewhere in our body. And that's where that dis-ease or that, heavy imbalance, this is where we start to see physical symptoms. So,
mhm,
I'm not a doctor, and this is why I moved more towards coach, because it's weaving these things. But I've heard so many stories of that physical symptom. So we have IBS. I have tons of people that come
mhm.
with IBS. And so
Yeah.
we start to look at the function. This is another piece of the work, is functionality of, okay, well, what's that organ or that part? Chakras are very much in this as well. Okay, what does that part of our body do? Is it's releasing, letting go of, it's taking nourishment. So let's go back. What happened that we are not letting go of, or that we are realizing
Mhm,
that it's time to learn how to let go of? And this is why we do delabeling, because I'm essentially asking you to unbecome what you know you are. And I'm not saying to eliminate the story. We want to hold space for both. That story is true. And
mhm,
how do we evolve out of that and unbecome that so we become more evolved beings? Our higher versions. We can call it anything we want, but I do have to be willing to let go. Or this is integrative, really, is invite in that both can be true. I can
mhm,
be that product of this experience, circumstance, real life thing, and not be that. And this is anahata. Anahata is the bridge space. It's the space in between. And that's where a lot of
mhm.
the spiritual work will start to come in as well. So it's
Mm,
deep, but I think really, really
yeah.
simplified, that it can be very easily understood. And I would love the feedback from some of the listeners to see, like, is this making sense?
Mhm.
Or is it like, what the heck is this lady talking about?
Yeah. So for like an example of like maybe putting this into practice. So like let's say I've got an awful pain in my back,
Mhm.
and as you work with me, like if I'm one of your clients and you start to ask me questions or we pinpoint what that might be, that's manifesting, and
Mhm.
it turns out there's somebody in my life, could be a boss, it could be a family member, that is
Mhm.
literally stabbing me in the back for
Mhm.
whatever reason, whatever the behavior is that
Mhm.
how it could literally pan out to be the case? Or is it something completely different that doesn't exactly align with that?
Well, here's the space for both, right? Because then there is very real, people have had accidents and people have,
Mm,
been physically hurt. And so, yes, there is, but I do think it highlights, for me, the symptomology that I use is, I use the word circuitry a lot, where,
mm,
we've had an experience or an input. And a lot of times that stuff comes in at very young ages. This is also nervous system work. And at young ages, we have underdeveloped brains. So we might
mm,
also have misinterpretations of experiences. But in our life, it was real. My parents were fighting because I didn't clean my room. And those
mhm,
plates that were flying, I don't know, were because I didn't clean my room.
mm,
And our brain can't really put together that that wasn't the true experience. Yes, maybe plates were flying, but it might not have anything to do with me cleaning my room, right? So this is where those adaptations come in, where we see OCD-like symptoms. It's like everything is perfect forever now till the end of time. Or we see adaptations come, and I use adaptation because my body had to adapt to something that it needed to do to survive. But when the circuitry, so let's say, I work a lot with trauma, and trauma very different than what most people understand it. I use trauma a lot as any time we disconnect from self, there is a severing. So whether it's a real experience, a perceived experience, something that we have, brought into this life, when we sever from self, I'm shutting down parts of myself to please other people. So it's not actually me, but I'm not connected to truth. I do a lot with wiring. So when that wiring has been severed, so I'm not connected to self, a lot of times we will keep hitting that switch. So we understand circuitry. I walk in, I flip a light switch on, it goes through the house and flips on the light. If that wiring has been severed, but I keep coming in and I keep hitting that light switch, that energy becomes stored. So we can call this emotion, we can call this thought, we can call this real experience, we can call this repetitive, we can all kinds of things here. And I speak kind of vaguely on purpose because I think each listener might be able to apply it differently in their own life. So now we have this severed wiring, but I've, hit that switch 150 times. When we start to do this work and we start to connect that wiring, now it has somewhere to go. That stored energy has somewhere to go. And so this is why I say sometimes that symptom doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. It could also signal that you are feeling more safe. It could signal that you're moving away from old adaptations. So it's trying to get louder to say, hey, we developed this adaptation to keep you safe and you're not doing that. So we're going to get louder so you come back into this familiar that we know how to keep you safe. So when we look at the physical pains, yes, when did it start? That emotional or mental that becomes dense over time. And we look to the sides of the body, we look to the functioning, and how much are you physically holding? What does your back do? And in, exercise physiology or in yoga, if I want to work my back, we often work with the core. So it might actually be a signal of something weaker that it's overcompensating for. So we kind of pull in a lot of details. And when I listen to stories, I'm able to kind of weave that oh, okay, right. I don't have a strong sense of self. So my back isn't feeling strong and my posture is different and my shoulders are rounded. Often that signal of, those depressive states. My shoulder, I'm hiding or protecting my core is a lot of what I see, and this is the heart work, all of the things that we do to protect this internal, central column, sense of self, heart. And if we go back to probably any listener, we've all had heart pain and we have learned some sort of adaptation to protect it.
Yeah. So how does this shift your clients on delabeling that area in their body? Once you get to the bottom of it, how does it shift the perspective to empower that individual on their healing journey?
I love this. So we can look at, those physical pains, those emotional pains. I say a lot of this we see in the form of triggers, where I do a lot with trigger work. Those are the things that activate us. Those are the things we tend to defend. This is where we're going to shut down or get loud. We're going to have some kind of movement around it. So I think the triggers become also easy access points. Because we could be sitting in a room right next to each other and something happens and it bothers me and not you. Why? That circuitry inside of me is trying to find resolve. It's trying to close the loop. It's okay, we need to resolve this issue. And, when I speak with the nervous system or to the nervous system, it doesn't know time, right? My nervous system is still the same nervous system I had when I was an infant, in utero, at different points in time, with different experiences. So it is trying to signal to us safety or danger. Remember that? Oh, don't do that. That's a lot of my podcasting work or the speaking and public speaking. And if you jump on my Instagram page, I have a lot of trauma around being recorded, public speaking. And so this has been my way of speaking to my nervous system to say like, okay, I hear you. That thing was dangerous then. And so we start to kind of untether and really understand that that system doesn't know time. So I need to convince it like we are in 2025 and I am a grown woman and I have a skill set here. And I talk to it and I have my clients start to begin to develop relationship with these triggers, these symptoms and their own body and speak to it like a child, right? Like if a child were to go and touch, a hot stove, like they don't know the stove is hot or what can happen. So we don't sit here and berate them with the thoughts that we tell ourselves and the judgments. We really sweetly like, oh, no, like boo boo, you're going to get hurt. That's an ouchie. We have all this sweet and gentle language, yet we don't do that for ourselves. So, starting to have that awareness around language and how do we communicate with self? That again, if I start to judge myself, that's going to kick me right into a survival system. All those other systems are offline. So convincing that nervous system that I can befriend this thing, that this thing can be here, this trigger, this, experience. And if we are safe, like this actually has a lot to do with real safety. But if we are now, it's like, well, what does safety look like and feel like? And we start to develop a felt sense around that. So I can resource that at any point in time. And then that's like our entry point into all of the other work.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good
I can go
point.
so deep so fast. I don't even realize sometimes.
But you're so right though. You hit on like, I've had some feedback from listeners about that inner critic and having that voice in your head. We call it the ego, I'm sure sometimes, but other times it's just negative self-talk. But yeah, it's like we have to learn, we collectively have to learn how to shut that down and speak to ourselves like you would to a child as well.
And I use a lot. My brain works well with visuals. And so I will, guide, and the listeners can do this too. The work of Masaru Emoto, who does the hidden messages in water. And if you have not heard this was really a game changer in my work because, and I was young. I mean, all this stuff like just found its way to me very, very young. But the hidden messages in water is where Masaru Emoto, he is past tense, but would speak to the water and show the water, photographs and music. And there was a way that they were freezing the water and taking photographs of it with a microscope. So on the more compositional level, right, the molecular level. And over again, what he was showing is that, the water that was exposed to, you're so cute and oh, we love you and all these like really supportive, beautiful words were actually on a structural level stronger and more well defined. And when the water was exposed to, I hate you, you're so dumb, and all of the things on that realm, they would almost disintegrate. Like they were not forming on that structural level, on that molecular level. So I do a lot, and this is where the vibrational work comes in. We use, it's applied kinesiology, or you can call it muscle testing, but the body is actually stronger because of that. The way I see it is like, okay, so these molecules are, perfect little snowflakes, like locked into each other, that we are stronger. And if they are, sort of disintegrated and dissolved, well, how are they forming structure and strength? And not our truth, a cosmic truth, a deeper truth. So, I might think I could lose a little bit of weight or I'm not good at this thing. As soon as I start to have those thoughts that are vibration, my body starts to respond to that. We are mostly water, right? We are affected by tides for a reason. We are mostly water. So if that is happening to water outside of us, our thoughts, our words, the way we speak to ourselves is changing our molecular structure, our cellular structures. So I find that can be a really great way to see like, whoa, like I could not unsee that ever. It is like locked in my brain. So now it's like, oh, okay. And I'll teach workshops on this of how do we tune into our body And, I call it like the playful workshop on tapping into your intuition, but it's using that applied kinesiology. And when you see that and feel that, like, oh, my body is actually moving different when I say this word or when I think this thought, no wonder, and tying back into that frequency of emotion. And this is the work of David Hawkins, who matched frequency to emotions. And so on this scale, let's say it goes from 0 to, I don't know, 800 or so. The lower frequencies, shame and guilt, come in at like 20 and 30 on his scale. And I don't use positive or negative. I use like more or less power, or you could use like creative and destructive, maybe. When I'm in shame, that's why it's easier to drop into. It's a lower frequency. It's easier to drop into lower than to, carry that weight or hold that bar higher. It takes practice. So then even fear comes in at like 100 on his scale. So even if I can get somebody to fear if they're in shame, or anger is actually a higher frequency than fear, right? So when people are angry, okay, let's go with that. So when I teach them this scale, they can start to see like, oh, why is it so easy to jump into judgment? Because I'm dropping. I don't have to do much. I just have to be weak. I don't have to be in my full power. But the neutrality, if I can find something as, not positive or negative, it just is this thing. I stop assigning value to it. Neutrality comes in at 250. So 250, I think the tipping point is at 200 on the scale from, let's say, destructive to constructive. And 200 is courage. So when we get people to find courage to move away from something that they identify as, when I find the courage to practice speaking up, that is starting to tip that scale. Neutrality tips it even more. So we want to access peace and love and joy and enlightenment and all this, but I'm not willing to access courage or neutrality. So we start small with like not good or bad. It's just when I can take on that language, that's going to do wonders on our body. And because I'm not judging it, I don't have to hold up that image. I don't have to hold up that mask. I don't have to hold up a facade. So again, going back to your back pain, what are most of our bodies holding? Lots of thoughts, lots of memories, lots of experiences. And some might be true and some might be just trying to find resolve. So how do we help it complete that circuitry?
Yeah, I love that. And that makes so much sense. Just thinking about what our body is communicating to us. And then you've provided some of the science behind it. And it's okay. It's actually better for us to do something that scares us
Yes.
so we
Yes.
can be more courageous and try something new rather than, worried about if it's going to go wrong or all
Yes.
the negative fear, guilt, all of that.
Real-time feedback, like our brain is always going to come up with the worst case scenario, even if it's not true. It's like, oh, don't do that just because this might happen. And it's like, well, most of the time, and it works in both ways. Like we can't imagine how great it's going to be, and sure, is it going to be wonky? Of course, I don't know how to do it. I'm not good at it. So this is where we use a lot of distress tolerance, meaning if I can tolerate being uncomfortable for a little bit and like, like if I went back to some of like my very first podcasts or, anything that I had to do the first time, it's like cringy. I'm like, oh my God, please don't listen to that one, but it's a
Right.
part of the evolution. If I can step into it, it's like, and keep stepping into it. If it's something that's important to me and I want to overcome it, now I teach my body that it's uncomfortable. It's not dangerous. And now it doesn't
Right.
have to be in that survival system. Now it's just
Yeah,
like, okay, can
absolutely.
I embrace that I'm just not great at this yet?
Yeah. And it's okay not to be perfect, right? You just have
It's
to
important. It's
lean
everything.
in. Yeah.
Well, and we live in this world of like, with social media, one that everything is sort of like, perfectly manicured. And we don't get to see the parts where they're messing up or how much time they've put into learning or what they're doing behind that, celebrity status or that perfect body or that dream job or that CEO, whatever it is.
Right.
That's a disservice to us, I think.
Yeah. And all the people that are behind them making that happen, not just one person.
Right. Right. If I
Yeah.
had a personal trainer or somebody sitting here telling me what and how to eat and making it for me, my body would probably look like that too,
Absolutely.
But we don't get that information.
No, we just see the finished product. Yeah. That's so
Yeah. So
true.
we lean in. I think that's so important.
I love that. So, Erin, we've talked a lot about the nervous system and the concept of danger or safety and how the nervous system is taking in signals into the body of either is this safe or is this dangerous. And you've also talked about some research from various scientists or thought leaders like Hawkins and is it Emoto?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
With the
messages in water.
water, messages in water. And so going through all of those different concepts, you've brought up some really interesting topics along the lines of thinking about how our nervous system is reacting to the outside world, what it's telling us, how it's communicating in our body, and then just how to process those communications, those signs that the body is giving us. So there was one other thing I wanted to make sure that we touched on about how you use flower essences to help the body either heal or how you use them in your practice.
Yes. So not on my clinical level. That's not like within the scope on the clinical, but I offer in suggestion, and then separately, this is also why I moved more towards coach, and I can use these things just a little more broadly. But flower essences, why I love them is because it's really no danger when we use those. And very different. Like when I've brought this up to people, they think of essential oils. So flower essences are very different than essential oils. There's no maceration in the process. It's very sustainable to the flower. So essentially when we're using flower essences, we take a flower, we submerge it in water, and the origin point, you might have heard of Dr. Bach. Edward Bach was one of the original Dr. Bach essences. You might see them in the holistic stores or health food stores. It started from dewdrops. And they were taking this water from that was kind of dripping off of flowers to use as healing. So I'm going to explain how we make it, and that might help as well. So when we're using flower essences, we take a flower and we will drop it into water. We usually use a glass bowl, and we don't even have to take the flower off of the stem necessarily. So we can leave it there. You can. And we leave it in either sunlight or moonlight. And what happens is, and this goes back to the work of Masaru Emoto, that water becomes the conduit. So water holds the vibration. And that's essentially what we're taking is the vibration, the essence of the flower. So the sunlight will, combined with the water, leave the imprint of the flower's vibration in the water. And so when we take the flower out of that water, that we put into a bottle, and that bottle becomes what we call the mother. From that bottle, we will take only a couple of drops to put in a small, let's say 1 or 2 ounce bottle with some more water. We preserve it with either like a glycerin or sometimes brandy. And that becomes our tincture bottle or our dosage bottle. And from that, we will only take a couple of drops a day that we might put into our glass of water. You could put it under the tongue. You can put it on acupressure points, put it in the bathtub. We can submerge in it. But so it's micro doses of vibration. And that's all it is vibration. And so how I explain this is, if we're talking, I love to use sunflower because most people understand sunflower. And so I would say, if you think of a sunflower, like what comes to mind when you're thinking of a sunflower?
I think of its color, yellow, green, and green leaves. I know that I've grown them personally, so I know that they get really tall, and they have a heavy head, and the stalk is thick. and produces a lot of seeds.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that. And for most people, right, they light up, right? Like, oh, I love
Mm-hmm.
sunflowers. And almost immediately, every time I ask that question, somebody's posture will change. Like, oh, sunflower. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's really what we're looking to. And we call it the doctrine of signatures, is we look at the plant, we look at its colors, we look at its structure, we look at where it grows and how it grows, the colors correlated to the chakras. And so, yes, sunflower grows taller than most of the other flowers.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you touched on the stalk. The stem is so thick, it's so strong. Its head sort of peaks to the sunlight. Its color is yellow, right? So that's solar plexus. And so typically we'll treat the opposite. So that droopy head, that weak backbone, that poor sense of self or low sense of self. And so if I were to suggest, and it's on the more masculine side, it's very loud and proud to be a
Mm-hmm.
sunflower. So we'll do micro doses of sunflower. And when I study with my teacher, and she's out of California, we would meditate with these essences and just take
Mm-hmm.
one by itself and see what sort of happened. And I remember sitting and I had my eyes closed and we take a couple of drops and I literally felt my spine lifting and my shoulders getting tall and my head lifting. And I was like, whoa, we take on the vibration of that plant, of that flower. I mean, people are doing it with crystals too. Like, so we're
Mm-hmm.
really working with vibration here. And just going back to like the crux of my work in therapy and going back to Masaru Emoto's work, thought is vibration. And we don't realize the power of that vibration, how it will start to, and then the neuroscience kicks in and the physiology kicks in and the nervous system, but it starts to change our body. So we're working with the subtle body here, which I will also call like our nervous system, or some people call it the aura or the energetic field. This is all science backed
Right.
measuring now. You know, they can see
Yes.
this and measure it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love working with the vibrational remedies. And then if it's too much, you just stop. But they are
I love
potent. It
that.
is potent medicine we ingest and we take on and we become, and it becomes a beautiful ally to this work. Helps us access a higher level frequency, a higher level thought, and it's sustainable. So we're not, destroying the plant matter in any way. No scent, there's no smell, so it doesn't have those added bonuses, but the
Right.
vibration is really powerful.
And I've read recently about natural remedies when I was experiencing some perimenopause symptoms about probably 6 months to a year ago.
Mhm.
And I was reading that nature provides everything that we need,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
everything living on this planet. If we lived in harmony,
Mhm.
we would be able
Mhm.
to reap the benefits from every living thing. And that
Mhm.
includes plants, that includes the weeds in our front yard.
Yes.
Dandelions are
Yes.
actually purposeful. They provide, something that I know many people use. They take dandelions and they harvest them, the roots, the stems, and everything, and they make tinctures for perimenopause symptoms, which I've done. So
Ah,
it makes
interesting.
sense
Mhm.
with the essences of flowers too,
Mhm.
or any plant probably. If you want to use their attributes,
Mhm.
you probably can find a way to do that. So that's fascinating.
It's so in alignment with what you're trying to create here with this podcast of that going slow, and just
Hmm.
going back to some of our conversations of these 5G speeds and really how all of this and there's a place for all of it. I do believe that it is, but not in the excess that we use a lot of this stuff. And so we're not
Right.
having that counterbalance of, I just saw something the other day and they were creating these grounding shoes that literally looked like they had grass in them, It's like,
Really?
or we could just go outside,
Okay.
like I
Right.
get what they're doing and they use the copper and it's a great concept, but
Mm.
that doing less to do more, a
Hmm.
lot of, the biohacking world that is like adding more in, it's like, I think we're missing the piece that is,
Yeah.
but why? We maybe need to take some things away and just like come back to
Hmm.
our roots of like
Hmm.
sunlight, right? Earth's grounding, fresh air, those ions that just are around the ocean and the trees that we get, so I'm loving it. And I cannot wait to see what this turns into for the podcast to help, people remember this.
Yeah, instead of trying to create it artificially, just go outside and enjoy the nature around you. But if you want to learn more about Anahata and working with Erin and all of the things that, she can provide in her coaching program, I think, that would be a great resource as well, because she is going back to the basics of nature, biology, neuroscience, nervous system. I mean, there's science behind this, but there's also practice and practical strategies. So I know you've talked a lot about the different studies that you've used in your practice, but is there anything else that you want to speak on as far as the Anahata concept or anything else around wellness?
Oh, sure. And it's interesting because Anahata was a word that I've just had from the beginning. So much of my work in all of my renditions has been about the heart and aligning with love. And I had an art studio that was creative heart. Everything is centered around this heart space. And Anahata is a foreign word to a lot of people, but it's taken from Sanskrit. It's taken from the yoga philosophies, and it's the heart center. And I explain it a lot through its symbol, and how I've understood the symbol are these two intersecting triangles, one with the base that's bigger at the top pointing downward, and one with the base that's bigger at the bottom pointing upward. And so every time I go to scrap Anahata, it's like, nope, you're here to teach people about this word. And the translation is unwounded heart, and actually unstruck is what it really means. And so when I play with that concept, these two triangles, or the sound unstruck, the sound that something makes when they are connected. And so these two triangles being like that which is above us working its way downward, and that which is below us working its way upward, connecting at our heart center. And I take that triangle and I turn it on its side, and that which is behind us and that which is in front of us, connecting at our heart center. And for most of us, that's where the wounding happens, whether it's something you said and it hurt my feelings, whether it's an experience that I had, it's always going to come back to the heart. And this is really, in psychology, I like to weave this aspect because people understand psychology, psyche, as the study of the mind. But the etymology of psyche is life and breath and soul. And so the work, when we're, working with me, it will inevitably get so deep into this soul work that these experiences that have hurt us and these people and this world, that's where we have to go for the healing to happen. And so the nervous system and all of our defense systems kick on as protection, and we have to learn how to turn them off so all of these other systems can come back online. And I know you're in the school setting, and we ask these kids to learn, and it's impacting them. How are they going to learn if their bodies are in survival and threat systems? How do we access compassion and understanding and forgiveness and unity and all of these great qualities that we're trying to aim for without, tapping into that space? So it's kind of the crux of my work and my life's passion. So that's, I always think, important to touch on.
But it seems like it would be so needed in the world right now, not just for people, little people and middle school and high school kids that are going through their school years, but also for adults that maybe didn't have the best experience in their childhood or teen years. We all have to heal from whatever wounds we've taken into our adult life. So this is great work. So I'm so honored to have you on today's podcast to talk about this. And if anybody is interested into working with you, learning more about your practice, I can make sure that everything that you provide into the world is included in the show notes. But do you have any particular offerings that you want to showcase before we close out today?
Offerings. Let's see. I've just created a bunch of mini workshops of, how-tos, kind of the frameworks for some of this work. And I'd say the biggest thing that I'm working on right now is creating a space called The Space. And it's our virtual community space. I have providers coming in with their offerings, more about collaboration, connection, and that community building. So we're doing pop-up style and drop-in style. Some will be live, some will be virtual. And so I'd love people to just, if they're needing support, that developed because I've just seen so many people through circumstance, through insurance, through cost of things, not being able to get support that they need. And to have these conversations and to have a place where we can kind of unravel and get confused and grow and play and learn. And so the idea there is that it's accessible. And so we can get it to anyone, anywhere. And I think that's really what the world needs right now. There's a lot of people that are needing support. So
yeah, that sounds like a great service. I just really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Kendra. This has been wonderful.
Yes,
I appreciate you.
That's it for today's episode of the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. I hope that you feel inspired and empowered to take proactive steps towards your own well-being during these significant life transitions. And now I'd love to hear from you. What's one mindful practice that you're going to go slow on this week to make a purposeful step towards progress? What was your biggest takeaway from my discussion today with Erin? So let's keep the conversation going, and I'll make sure that I put all the information in the show notes to connect with Erin. And I hope that you consider checking her website out. You can always connect with me on coachingwithkendrachapman@gmail.com and visiting my website, www.coachingwithkendrachapman.com. And I hope that you'll consider looking me up on Instagram, DMing me, or commenting on anything that I post to just kind of keep the conversation going and let me know how you're adding mindfulness into your practice. So remember, as you're walking through whatever season you're in, I hope that you're doing so with confidence and purpose and a little extra grace. And if you love this episode, I hope that you'll consider sharing it with a friend or everybody you know who needs a little calm or clarity in their health journey. And as always, stay connected and remember, the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. And until next time, I hope that you remember to go slow to go fast. And thanks for listening.